Welcome to Between the Shelves, the premier Save a Library podcast. I am your host, Alex, and this week I'm joined by our director, Jenn. Hi, Jenn.
Hi, Alex.
And the head of Teen Services, Marianne.
Hi, Alex.
Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit for the podcast for this episode. It's a little bit more serious topic. Banned Books Week starts October 1st. It's the first week of October. And we're going to be talking about banned books a little bit in this episode, how that works, what the challenge process is like, a little bit about Save a Library's policies or libraries in general, how they're affected by it. And we're going to kind of cover all of our bases. So it's going to be a little bit of a more conversational episode. And I think we have two of the best employees in the library to talk about it.
Aw,
that's very nice of you. Yeah. Thank you.
And me.
And you. Yes, you are included in that circle, yes.
So I love statistics. I love facts. So I'm going to start with just a couple of facts about banned books, if that's okay.
That's a good idea.
So 2022 was the record for the most reported book challenges in the United States over the previous record of 2021. So last year there were 2,571 challenged books in libraries. The previous record was 1,858, so that's quite a jump in 1 year. And the tracking for challenge books only started in 2003. And it's been going up and up every single year, and it seems exponentially almost. So the most common reasons cited for book challenges, according to the ALA, are sexually explicit content, LGBTQ content, or EDI content, which they define as equity, diversity, or inclusion content. So right. Kind of a broad spectrum encompassing that one.
Just to add to that, I would say you're right. Sexually explicit is offensive language is another profanity, and that if it's unsuited to a particular age group is another reason why something is challenged, and that can encompass a lot. All of those things could fall under that one particular topic.
So where do book challenges take place? 48% of them take place in public libraries. 41% take place in school libraries. 10% take place in I'm getting my stats wrong. I see 41% in school libraries, 10% in schools. So I guess that's books like for classroom curriculum books, right. Yeah. And 1% is in higher education.
Okay.
So a bulk of the book challenges are happening in school libraries and public libraries.
Right.
And one more stat I have here is who are the people challenging books? 30% of them are parents. 28% are patrons, so patrons of public libraries. 17% are political or religious groups. 15% are from library boards or school boards. And 3% are from actual librarians or teachers. And there's one more. 3% are elected officials.
Right. I have a 1% by students too, but these are ALA statistics that you're talking about, American Library Association. Yeah. So it might just be a different year of the stats that I'm looking at, but the numbers are all in that same area. So the bulk of challenges are initiated by parents, I would say.
Yeah.
That's the majority.
Definitely. And I would say that 28% that are patrons are probably parents of children, but making a request as a patron at a public library.
Right.
So that's kind of like just a broad overview of what the challenging kind of looks like in the United States. So I'm wondering, Jenn, if you could maybe help us with like some terminology. Like what is the difference between a book challenge and a book ban?
So for our purposes as librarians and as library administrators, we look to ALA for guidelines and for definitions of this type of thing. So according to American Library Association, a challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict materials based upon the objections of a person or group. The banning is when these materials are actually removed from the material. Challenges do not simply involve a person expressing a point of view. Rather, they are an attempt to remove the material from the curriculum or the library, therefore restricting access to others. So there are a lot of challenges going on right now. For our purposes, we do not see that the same as being a banned book. So you can come to a library and say, I do not think this book should be in the library for whatever reasons you deem. If we decide to take the book out of the collection based on those reasons, then that's a banned book. So there is a difference, and it's important to delineate that, because in our library, or libraries around here in other states, things are different. We don't have, and I'm not talking about school libraries, I'm talking specifically about public libraries. We don't have a tremendous amount of books that actually have been banned from the collection, that they were in the collection once and they were banned because of the reason that somebody challenged it. So that's the difference between a challenge and a ban.
So I think one common misconception is that book bans are kind of a bottom-up thing from patrons to the library wanting books banned, but that's not always the case. There are top-down bans as well, or challenges as well, that come from administration, boards, or even librarians as well.
Right.
Kind of self... regulating. Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
Because I just will say, Marianne, you could probably talk to this point, is that there are sometimes books that are reviewed very well and we'll talk a little bit more about how we select our materials a little bit later on in the podcast. But there are books that are reviewed well, that there's a patron demand for, that we purchase, and when we actually get the book in hand as librarians, we can change our mind and say, like, you know what, this really should not be in this department. It's, and sometimes this has already been checked out, or sometimes it's not been checked out, but somewhere along the process. So I just want you to talk to that, like how that, and then I want to tell a story about top down, where it does happen.
Yeah, so there have been many times that sometimes the children's department might order a book and, it's reviewed very well, that it's great for a certain age, but maybe they get it and they flip through it and they're like, oh, this isn't maybe best for, our patrons here. And they'll say to the teen department, hey, do you want this? This is better for, younger teens to older teens. And then I'll put it in my collection. It goes the other way also. Sometimes I'll buy a book for the teen department, reviewed very well. It's really great for a specific age group that would be in my patrons. And then I get it, I flip through it, maybe I read it. And I think that maybe it's more for adult. I don't think the teens here. I don't think it's appropriate. And so I'll give it to our adult department. So it's still accessible. It's still there. We just have to, we go by our reviews that we read in all the professional journals, and then we use our own criticism of it. If it's appropriate, we know our patrons. We know who's using our collection, especially when it comes to the kids and the teens. So to that, yes, we might have to, deem it not appropriate.
Right. And you're touching upon an issue about whose responsibility is it for what your children or your teens or even adults are reading. It's obviously adults are responsible for their own content. We believe as library professionals that parents are responsible for monitoring what their children read. Even older kids, if they are concerned about it, that does not fall on us, because our mission is to have something in the library for everyone. So what you think is not right for your child could be perfectly needed or wanted by another child in another family.
Right.
So I just wanted to tell them a quick story that I might have shared before not on the podcast, but with you guys, is that at a different library, there was a children's book that was on the shelf. It was a holiday book, and a parent asked to speak to me about the book, and I got the book from down the children's department, and I read it. It was a picture book, and at first glance, I was like, I don't really see what the issue is with the book. I didn't know what her complaint was going to be. So she came in and she's like, this book, it was kind of like The Night Before Christmas, but it was written about Hanukkah. It was like a Jewish version of that story.
Okay.
And she's like, look at the images of this story. She's like, these are not flattering images of what Jewish people, it was very stereotypical. And I just did not see it on the first view. And once she pointed it out to me, I was like, and she was lovely. She was just like concerned, like, isn't this a little odd? And I was like, you're absolutely right. So we did take the book out of the collection. It was a highly reviewed book. It had gotten good reviews from some of the publishers. But for us, looking at it I needed a new set of eyes to look at it. So I think that's another misconception about challenges, is that we're very hardline and that we're not willing to discuss. We do welcome the conversation, even though they're difficult sometimes to have. We are not immune to having those conversations about why do you find this book challenging? And then we have a set of criteria that we have to compare it against to see if it really hits the mark of to be banned.
So can we talk about that for a minute? That was the next topic I wanted to cover is, what is the actual process of challenging a book? Like, what does a library do once a book is challenged?
Okay. When a book is challenged, and I'm just going to speak for our policy, because we do have a policy. It's called our material selection policy. And at the end of that policy, it does address if you want to challenge. It might be a good moment for me to say I've been here 5 years, going on 6 years. We have never had a patron follow through with the procedure of challenging a book. So we call it reconsideration of materials. So that means we're going to reconsider the item that you are questioning if it should be in our collection or not. So there is a form, because, we're our librarians. We do love forms. And it's called Request for Reconsideration of Materials. So we ask for you to fill out that form, and then that's submitted to the director, myself, and then a committee is formed. And that committee is consist of the assistant director, a librarian who purchased the challenge material. So if it was a teen book, Marianne would be on that committee. Then we also ask an outside consultant from our library system to be on that committee, and then 2 department heads that are not in the department of the challenge. So we try to make it as a diverse group of people. Everybody on this committee is highly informed about selection of materials, and we'll be able to compare it to our policy and so then we have a best practices for the review committee to take. So they will look at, obviously they have to read the book, which, not everybody reads the book, right, Marianne? Like, you're shaking your head, because a lot of times people will go on something they've seen on social media, or a friend has said, I don't like this book because of X, Y, and Z. But it is important that everybody who's involved in this conversation actually reads the challenge material. Then they review all the materials. They look at the ALA Bill of Rights. Then they look at our policies. They look at the reviews. They look at any other resources that they can gather on this book. There is also something called the Challenged Materials Interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights. So you could Google that to see what that's all about. It's a mouthful. Then, like I said, they review our material. And they also look at professional guides, such as the Intellectual Freedom Manual. So this is not something that we take lightly. The committee will meet and use all of these tools that are within our grasp to decide if the book, or it could be a movie. It doesn't have to be a book, right? It could be a CD. It could be anything. So we keep the personal identification of the committee anonymous. We just really try to keep this as really serious and as thoughtful as we can. They make a final report with a recommendation, and the recommendation can be one of 3 things. One is we're keeping the book, we're keeping it in the same spot. No action is going to be taken. They can decide to relocate the material, which Marianne was talking about, moving it to a different section of the library, a different department, or they could decide they're going to remove them. They want the material removed completely. The report may differ depending on the types of resources that's being challenged, such as, like we're talking about, you can also not only challenge a book or a movie, you could also challenge a display or a reading list. There are other things that are not just like the actual book. So then the committee meets with the library director, who then will communicate with the person who originally made the challenge, as well as the library board of trustee. Appeal of the committee's decision can be made in writing to the library director. So the final responsibility after this whole process, if they don't like, the challenger does not like the decision, they can appeal it. Then that comes to the director, and that's the final word after the appeal, is that I would kind of do a similar process because I'm not on the committee, the original committee. I would go through the process and decide. So it's pretty lengthy and it's thorough for a reason. We don't take it lightly. But I will say we haven't had any challenges. We've had people vocalize certain questioning some materials we have, but nobody's actually gone through these steps since I've been here.
And if you're listening right now and you're saying, okay, librarians are just burying this in bureaucracy to prevent challenges from happening, I do want to say I've had a book and a display of mine challenged within the library, not from a patron, from, well, kind of a hybrid. A patron spoke to a librarian pushed it up the chain a little bit, and the book was removed in that case and the display was changed. So I don't want to make it sound like, from everything you've heard now, that like nothing will happen if you have a challenge off, or it will take months and months to happen. This has all happened pretty quickly.
I'm glad you brought that up, Alex, because I should have started with the first thing that should happen is a discussion with the librarian who, we were talking about a display, librarian who made the display, or the librarian who's in charge of the collection. And sometimes, very often, things can kind of be resolved at that level, just a conversation. If it gets to the point where you're actually going to fill out and have a material reconsidered, the form itself is one page. It's not a lot of work to fill it out. The work really falls on to the committee, and that's purposeful. It's not to make things longer. It's just to be that we're really doing right by the material and by the patron, that we're taking it seriously. So, but often these types of things can kind of be discussed and a compromise can be made, or something can just be tweaked a little bit to make it a little bit more appropriate, whatever the case may be.
I wanted to add that if somebody does challenge something, oftentimes, how you had said earlier, Jen, that they don't always read the book. So that's one thing. A lot of the times they don't want to fill out either the paperwork for it, either they just want to vocalize it, and the end, that's it. Right. Sometimes they don't even want to leave their name.
Right.
So it's kind of, you got to, if you want to go through with it, you need to follow through with everything, and right. It'll really be reconsidered. Like, we will, take this seriously.
Of course, we will. And really calm conversation is much more productive than, yelling or screaming or, just we're all here for the same purposes, to serve our community. Mm-hmm. And there are compromises that have to be made on occasion.
So another thing I just wanted to add is, the library should be reflecting the community. So if you don't make your voices heard on what you want to be included in the collection, nothing will be changed. So, for instance, we had a patron come in a few weeks ago and voiced his concern over the types of newspapers we had in our collection. So we took that into consideration, and we reevaluated what newspapers we were subscribing to. And in this case, I think the patron did have a point, that not that our newspapers had any sort of political leaning at all. I don't agree with that, but we could have had a wider selection, just more.
A wider collection, right? And we fixed it, right?
What I told him was, literally, you're the first person who's mentioned this, so obviously nothing is going to change unless we hear from our community what they would like to see curated in their collection. So,
and it also can be the opposite. Could happen is one person comes and, why don't you have, this is a little opposite than challenging a book, but I'm sure we've all experienced this. Why don't you have this one book in your collection? I want this book. I don't want to wait for it to come from another library. So then it goes all back to our material selections. Like, we only have a certain amount of money for materials. And if a book is not reviewed well, that's one consideration. But if nobody's requesting it, and you're the only person out of all of our, tens of thousands of patrons, and we have other books that are, 100 to 200 holds on, we have to take that, it does come down to a money issue sometimes. It's not even about the actual content of the book. It's just, we'll be able to get it for you, but you're just going to have to wait because we got to borrow it from the library. Does it make sense for us to purchase this when nobody has shown any interest in this particular item? A little different than a challenge, but it sort of falls into the same conversation.
I was kind of using that point to move into the next topic that I wanted to talk about, which is how does a librarian curate the collection? What is our collection development process like? I think that might just be of interest to any of our listeners or library patrons. How do we go about selecting these books in the first place?
Yeah, insider baseball. It's an exciting time. So Marianne, maybe you can talk about how you pick the books that come to your shelf.
So for the teen department particularly, we read all the journals. We see everything, comes through the librarians there.
Can you just explain to the listener what a journal is?
So there are professional library journals. They are reviewed by other professionals out there, all different librarians around the country. Do you have a better
explanation? The publishers, it's not, it's book reviews. Book reviews. We could be talking about different materials, but right now we're just going to talk about the book.
So the publishers send out their books to whoever is reviewing the books, to the librarians and the professionals.
Some of the journals are like Publishers Weekly, Library Journal,
Kirkus
Reviews,
right? Book lists,
right? These are peer reviewed, considered industry standards tools for librarians to use. So you get a Publishers Weekly on your desk.
Publishers Weekly, there's another one. Yes.
Right? And then,
so we go through. Everybody here, we all go through all the journals. So all the library, all the professional staff, we all go through all the journals. We focus obviously on our department. So for the teen ones, I will read myself and the other librarian on staff, Angela, we read through all the reviews, and we go from there. So sometimes there's something that is really well reviewed. Maybe it's got a star review and we're like, this is going to be a hot item. This is the review will say for, fans of, this particular series. And it's like, well, this was a hot book for teens. So I want more books like that. So that when they're done with a particular book that they love, I could hand them something something similar. So that even sometimes maybe it's, poorly written. And so the review's not the best. I still might buy it if I know that there's going to be a patron that's going to really like this book, that there's high interest in, this particular genre. Likewise, if I see a really popular author that's really hot with the teens, maybe it's not the best reviewed book, but I'll buy it because I know that people that love, a particular author, like let's say John Green, David Leviathan, I'm going to buy anything these authors have because they're so popular. And they're popular with adults. So, I do get a lot of adults that come into the teen room. We often do buy a lot of the starred reviews stuff. We also have vendors that come in and, sell some stuff. So that's where I get a lot of my nonfiction from, because nonfiction is not as reviewed as the fiction books. That's generally how we do it in the teen department. Also, oftentimes I do have patrons say, can you buy this book? And, as Jen said already, it does depend on the money. Mm-hmm. So if you catch me in the beginning of the fiscal year, I'm more likely to buy the book because I'll have the money. Then if you're coming, closer to July, it's unlikely I'm going to buy it. But often I will buy it. If I know that a patron does really want it and I know they're, a reader, I'm going to probably buy it for them. And maybe I'll go to Amazon and I'll buy it there because it's not sold on our particular vendor site. Right. I just bought a whole bunch of nonfiction books off Amazon because it wasn't sold anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And they are really, really popular nonfiction titles among particularly Sayville middle schoolers. It's just really popular. So, and a lot of other libraries didn't have them. So I made sure that I could get them for my collection.
And another part of the process that is not about selecting the books, but how important it is for librarians to stay on top of their collections. And that includes weeding the collection. Yeah. So especially if you're say a brand new librarian and into let's say Marianne, new department head, and you come up and that collection has not really been weeded. Mm-hmm. It could be several years. This is something that should always be ongoing in but sometimes it's hard to to get into the stacks and weed, but really important part of getting rid of materials that could be obsolete for many reasons. It could just be nobody's taken out in 15 years, or it could be nobody's checked it out, or that we've learned things have changed in the world, or there's a more recent book that is more appropriate or updated. So the weeding is also part of the collection development of our collections.
And particularly for nonfiction, like the weeding is very important because so much of that information does go out of date, or, times change and, things have different names and, there's new vocabulary. And I always use the example of several years ago, like they changed the Dewey number for autism. Like it was under mental illness for a long time, and then it finally got its own number. So it's like, you want to change all of those books. You don't want books that say autism is a mental illness when it's not. We have new, studies that show this is something else. So I'll get rid of all of those books and I'll buy all new ones. And,
it's important. It's work, and obviously our policies are the backbone of all these decisions, and they reflect the library's philosophy and the communities and the mission that we have to serve the community.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we talked about this a little bit in our So You Want to Be a Librarian episodes a couple of months back. Collection development is there are courses we take in it in our master's degrees. This is something that librarians are trained in. So all the policy obviously has a large part of that. We learn how to collect statistics on our entire collection to see what books are relevant to the community. And at least the way I'm developing my nonfiction collection, plays a large part in what I'm ordering.
And this working with your colleagues within your department. Marianne, your department's smaller, but you do have professional librarians on staff. And we require all of our librarians to have a master's degree in library science. We do hire library trainees who are in school, but their position is different than a full-time or a graduated librarian. It has to be ALA accredited school, and they also have to hold a New York State Public Librarian Professional Certificate. So anybody who has that criteria, but maybe graduated after January of 2010. So those are the newer librarians, even though that's 13 years ago. They must, every 5 years, you have to complete 60 hours of professional development. And we're big here on professional development at Sayville. Our librarians go to all sorts of PD opportunities to learn about this stuff and other stuff. But I just wanted to say, Alex, just to piggyback on you, and I went off on a tangent there, but it's also a collective effort with the department. So if you're a brand new librarian, of course we want, collection development it's a little bit of a science and a little bit of an art, because you can't buy every book. So you have to, you have to learn that, and it takes time. So it's important for the department heads and the other librarians to sort of, check over. If you built a cart of books and then maybe you're a new librarian, your department head is going to review those books before they're actually purchased for the library. So it's more than just having the degree. It's also having the experience of doing it for a while. You get better and better at it. It's very nuanced about, and a lot of times it does come down to money.
Well, yeah, and it's you get your certain budget every year, and you have our fiscal year. July begins in July, and then it goes till June. And if you have a couple people on staff that are ordering books too, then you got to balance. Like, well, okay, I can't order all these books when I know that somebody else is also going to be going through them. Then you're just going to blow through your budget real quick, and then you can't buy anything that's like published early next year because you already went through your whole budget. And so it is like a balance.
I feel like, I don't know if this is still true because it's been a while since I've been the person going through the journals and ordering, but I know when I was a teen librarian before I was a director, and it always kind of went in like ebbs and tides. It wasn't like every month, you're just going to split your month 12 months and spend. You can't, because sometimes there's just a flourish of activity, and then there's months where there's not a lot going on. So it is challenging to keep your budget in line with that unpredictability of purchasing books. And then one more thing I just want to say about that. We're a public library, and we should have started with this. We have very different mission and philosophy than school librarians. We're not here to talk about the banning of books in schools because that's not our area of expertise. But we are very different mission, and we don't work against or have to be considerate of a curriculum per se.
I think we've pretty much covered collection development, the process of book challenging. So I just want to talk a little bit more broadly, if we can, about book bans, like what it actually means, kind of philosophically, if we can, for a moment. So what do you think we lose when a book is banned? So why does anyone care if a book is banned? I can start if
Well,
I have an idea.
Yeah, the thing that comes to the top of my head is that a lot of the books that are challenged and that are banned are about people of color or the LGBTQ plus community, and if you're in a diverse community, you want a diverse collection. You want and speaking as a teen librarian, I want my teens to be represented in the materials that they are selecting. So, and that goes for anybody's background, really. I mean, you want to see, if you're Asian Pacific, you want to see maybe a character represented that looks like you, that sounds like you, that has the same culture as you. And it goes for, any kind of diversity. It goes for any kind of we want inclusive books. I want my teens to come in and see themselves represented, and they're gonna check out those books. They're gonna take them home. They're gonna be happy. They're gonna come back. They're gonna want more. And so I think that that's why it's so important to have these books. But then those are the books that often upset people, and that they might not agree with whatever is in that book, and so that's why they're going to challenge them, right. And they're not seeing what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think having a diverse population be able to see themselves in the collection is incredibly important, especially for marginalized groups. And then the flip side of that is have those books available for people like me, a straight white male, you can read these books, and even though you don't see yourself represented in them, you can grow empathy towards
You're definitely learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's a learning opportunity.
Yes.
So I would say I really do believe that when somebody is challenging a book or requesting a book be banned or moved to a different select part of the library, I really do believe that their intention is good. When we're talking about books for children and teens, I do believe that and this is why conversation is so important, because there's no it's not black and white. In a lot of ways, these conversations, there's a lot of gray area that needs to be discussed. And I do think that a person really truly thinks that this is, but I think just what gets lost in the thread is, and what we go back to over and over is, I totally respect your opinion that you think this book is inappropriate for your teen or your child, but you can't make that decision for another parent or another child.
The entire community.
Right. And so that's really where we fall on that particular conversation. If every single person was against this one book, maybe we would be having a different conversation. But it often is, I don't want my child exposed to that book. I don't even want them to be able to browse and find it in the library. And that gets a little trickier, and it goes back to our beginning of our podcast of, it really does fall on the parent to handle that with your kids, to have the dialogue, have the conversations about your expectations, go to the libraries with them. We are not trying to tell anybody how to parent. We're all parents in this room, and we all probably have different styles in the way we've handled our children, and we're not looking to do that. We're just responding to the demand and the need in our community for books, and some of them you might agree with and some of you not. And I know it sounds easy just to say, oh, well, just don't take it out, but I hear you when you're saying, well, if they're exposed to it and all their friends are reading it and they're getting all of this knowledge that I don't think they're ready for, or I don't believe in, that again, it just falls back to the parent, right? Because it's not a universal agreement between everyone. So it is, and that's why I wish the conversations could be more civil and more The compromise of understanding why. And sometimes it's hard to have that, but I think that's what we need to do and keep. So I listened to a podcast this morning before I came in on just talking one more thing that was interesting, because it was an author, and she was saying, my book was banned recently, and people are saying, oh, well, now it's gonna be a bestseller because it's banned, and people are gonna want to find it and they want to use it. But that's not really what happens. That might happen with some books that people are gonna get the books no matter what. But most books are just taken out of the collection that are truly banned, and that's it. Nobody is ever exposed to it because they don't have the big publishing name behind them, or they don't have their name is not that big, and they're just out. So that's a misconception that, as soon as a book is banned, if we're talking about a book series like Harry Potter, it probably helped sales. I don't know. It was big sales no matter what. But most books that are actually removed, sadly, they're just gone into the ether.
For every 10 books that are banned, there's one, like All Boys Aren't Blue or something, the author's able to capitalize on the publicity and shoot their book up the bestseller list. But again, that's not the norm. Exactly.
Yeah.
If I could just go back to Jen's point when she was saying that ultimately it does fall to the parent's decision about, what their child is reading. I did actually I had a parent within this past year who came in with, their 3 young teens, and he or she had their child pick out a bunch of books, and the parent sat there and literally flipped through everything. And most of them were graphic novels, so, they're eyeballing it. And they said no to pretty much all the books. And at first I got really upset, this kid is going home with nothing, and that makes me sad. But then I was like, you know what? No, it is the parent that this parent did not come over. They did not say this should not be, in the teen department. They made that final choice that this was not appropriate for my child. And that's how it should be.
Right. Yes. That's their parenting responsibility and the way that they view it.
Yeah.
I was pretty strict when my son was a teenager. It was helpful because I'm a librarian and I was a teen librarian, so I was very familiar with the literature. But I would often, if he was reading a book, I was reading it at the same time. Yeah. Or if not, I would read it before. Because honestly, it's a great way to communicate with your kids. Yeah. It's just being, if they're in a book and you're in the same book, it's the easiest conversation to talk about is somebody else's life that's happening in the book.
I have my son right now who is young, and he loves graphic novels, and he was reading a series this entire summer that was an adult graphic novel, and he was devouring them. So and I'll let him read whatever he wants because I was raised like that.
Right.
So every now and again I'd get, Mom, what does consummate mean? And so we have this very open conversation about, he's in 6th grade now, so it happened this summer. So he's asking me questions and I'm talking to him about it, and that's
your
that's what my style, and that's what I want him to do.
And so at the end of the day, though, we don't bring our parenting styles to the workplace.
Right.
So we just talked about how we handle differently our kids' reading, our preteen readings habits. But at the end of the day, we can leave that all at the door. We know as librarians, it's been a challenging time for librarians to feeling that they need to defend their ability and their knowledge and their authority in making these decisions. And it's not even about making decisions, just having a process in place and talking about the books.
I think that's a nice place to end it. I'll just mention, if you are curious about what the most banned books are currently, the ALA has a list of the top 13 banned books in the country right now, which I'll put a link to in our show notes. I was surprised to learn that I hadn't read most of them. Most of what I thought were the banned books are mostly classics. So this past couple of weeks, I've been trying to check off as many as I could, and I got through about half of them. So I'm pretty...
Wait, out of how many?
13.
13? Oh, that is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're all pretty short.
Yeah. Well,
mostly
teen
teen
books.
books.
Yeah.
And I think a good, that's a perfect thing for a librarian or anybody. No, I'm going to take this list and I'm going to see really because really at the end of the day, it's about knowledge and understanding of the process, and just really asking us questions about it. We're here to talk about all of this because we really care what the community wants and needs. So please take a time to look at those websites that you're going to put up on the podcast page, some resources, and it might be something you'd be surprised to learn about censorship and about the way public libraries do their collection development compared to school libraries and academic libraries. It's a lot to learn, and I think that the more educated you are on this stuff, the easier these conversations become.
I think that's all we have for this episode. Jen, Marianne, thank you both so much for joining me.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
All right, and I just want to make a quick note. This episode is going to be coming out the first week of October. Thank you, in Band's Book Week. But next month, November 4th, is the Sable Fan Fest.
Yes.
I'm going to be saying this every episode this month.
Yeah.
Plug it.
Saturday, November 4th, 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We have food trucks, costume contest. Star Wars characters are going to be here. We have 25 or 26 vendors booked at this point.
Amazing.
Arts and crafts, family activities.
A giant band playing.
A marching
fandom
band
music.
is going to be playing.
Marching band.
All your favorite theme songs.
Oh, the big van, the big bus from SCLS will
Yes,
be here
the
with the
gaming
video
bus.
games.
Yeah. I've got trivia happening.
I'm sure the popcorn machine will be in.
Yeah. Well, they're going to smell it when they walk in. Free popcorn and teen.
Great.
Yes.
So come
I
hungry.
can't wait to get
I can't wait to get my
bacon
my
cheese
lunch.
sandwich.
Yes, that was really good last time. Yeah.
So definitely come out for that.
Yes, we will all be there.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.